The Florida Gators have a massive problem to fix, and the decision that they have to make is going to have a huge impact, one way or another, on the future of watching games in the Swamp. Last week, it was announced that Ben Hill Griffin Stadium is about to get a $400 million facelift. Here's the thing, though. We don't know exactly what that facelift or renovation is going to include, but we're going to tell you about a few of the rumored changes in just a second. Also, guys, I know because you can probably tell this is not my normal background. I am at the state PTA conference because that's another hat that I wear, but I wanted to bring you updated content, so there's no rest for the wicked. All right, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium is one of the most iconic stadiums in all of college football. I have been to more games than I can count there, starting from when I was very, very little. But some of the loudest moments that I have personally heard in the Swamp include a couple of games I'm going to tell you about. 1997, Florida versus Florida State. Guys, I was 13 years old. Florida was the reigning national champions, and they had an okay season, but not the absolute best. And, if it's Steve Spurrier, if it wasn't a championship, it wasn't the best. But they had a chance to knock off Florida State, who was not only number one, but they were undefeated. And remember, back before the BCS, before the playoffs, you just played in a championship game. And Florida had a chance to keep FSU out of it. They were alternating between Doug Johnson and Noah Brandeis. And if you were a Gator fan back when Steve Spurrier was the coach, you know that he has that famous quote of saying, if you've got two quarterbacks, you've really got none. So that'll kind of give you the idea of what Florida was working with that year. Florida actually led at halftime and at the end of the third quarter. But in the fourth quarter, Florida State started to dominate. Sebastian Janikowski had a field goal that he kicked. Then afterwards, he turned around and he did the Gator chomp to the sideline. Stadium was pretty quiet at that moment. Spurrier was not happy about the Janikowski Gator chomp. I have this seared in my brain. Goes over to the sideline, starts drawing up plays. There is a huge drive that happens. I believe Jacquez Green had a big catch in it. Fred Taylor had a catch that set the Gators up at the 1 yard line. Fred Taylor runs it in. He had 4 touchdowns on that game. Loudest I have ever personally heard the Swamp. Florida won 32-29. It was massive. All right, a couple other really loud games that I personally witnessed. 1999, Florida versus Tennessee. Alex Brown sacked Tennessee quarterback T. Martin 5 times. Florida came up with a huge 4th down stop to win that game, 23-21. And then the game that everybody points to that's, more recently a Gator fan as the absolute loudest that they've ever heard the Swamp, 2006, Florida versus South Carolina. This game is nicknamed the Cock Block. Jarvis Moss blocked an extra point and a field goal in this game. There was another block earlier on. Florida beats South Carolina, clinches the SEC East. This is what sends them to the SEC championship game, which eventually sets them up for the 2006 national championship game. That stadium was pretty rocking then as well. Right now, though, guys, what is the loudest that you ever remember the Swamp being? Hit the comments below and tell me what you remember. Whether you were there watching it in person, you had it blaring on the TV. This will kind of be dependent on when you became a Gator fan, but I want to hear about it. Put it in the comments. People fear the Swamp because it is filled with 90,000 hot, sweaty, sticky, and loud Gator fans that are crammed in on top of each other. At its loudest, there are very, very few stadiums that can touch it in terms of noise. Some teams claim that they have a 12th man. The Swamp is the 12th man for the Gators. Changing that would be criminal. So let's talk about what we have heard. Okay, so this renovation is rumored to be anywhere between removing a couple thousand seats to up to a 15,000 seat reduction. They're going to add luxury boxes. They're looking to widen seats and aisles. They're also looking to update the concourses and concession stands that weren't updated the last renovation. They're also looking to update some bathrooms. Those are all good things in theory, right? Those are all things that the swamp probably needs to happen. Another thing I haven't heard talked about a lot, but I was told, is that there are some major issues in the underground portion of the stadium. Something fans will never see, team will never see, but there's some real structural issues that absolutely have to be addressed. So that does make this renovation project a necessity, not a luxury. And a couple things that also need to be considered is that the historical buildings connected to the west stands cannot be touched because they are historical buildings. So that does limit what UF is able to do and what they're able to add. It is my understanding that seats can be wide in there, aisles can be wide in there, but I don't think that there can be skyboxes added on there. All right. They have to be very careful of what they do on that side of the stadium. And listen, this kind of is probably the best case scenario that this renovation of the swamp is happening, because we were also told that some of the other things that were being considered was moving the stadium entirely, either to where the golf course currently sits or even over by Southwest and where the new baseball facility is. In my opinion, that would completely change Florida football forever. So I'm glad that that does not appear to be the route that they're going. Another thing that was considered was that the swamp could be torn down and rebuilt exactly where it is. The land is small, and supposedly the type of stadium that Scott Strickland would would build if he was starting from the bottom up would be a different shape than the swamp currently is. So if the tearing down and rebuilding where it stands limits what can be done. So it seems like that's not a route that they're going either, which I think that's good news. I don't think we need to take the stadium from where it currently is, heart of campus. It is one of the most iconic places in college football, and I'm a fan of changing it as little as possible. I also would love to know who is getting a say in what happens. You know, the saying, he who makes the money makes the rules. So it is my guess that lots of big money boosters will have an opinion on what happens here. And I'm sure that a big portion of this decision is, how do we attract those new big money boosters? And I think that's important, and I'll address it in a minute. But I hope those are not the only people getting a say. I also hope that we're picking the brains of Steve Spurrier, of former players that have been woven into the history of Florida football, that have helped grow this program after they were gone. I hope that there is just a big group of people giving their opinion. I hope it's not just Scott Strickland deciding this, because listen, I think Scott Strickland's a great athletic director, but in theory, he may not even be here by the time these renovations are done. So I really think people whose blood, sweat, and tears has been put into this program for life should get a say in the next 100 years of Florida football, because that's what this is shaping. So what's my suggestion? I get it. College football viewership is changing. Many fans are choosing to watch from the comfort of their own home, where they can watch multiple games at a time, and schools are looking for ways to combat that. I am a fan of modernizing aspects of the stadium. Widening the seats and or adding more chairbacks is great. Listen, I spend every season with the person next to me essentially on my lap. I would love a few more inches. The bathrooms certainly need an update, as do some of the concessions. The last update that was done about 10 years ago did a great job of addressing some of these issues in parts of the stadium, and they didn't leave the stadium looking or feeling any less like the intimidating swamp that we know and love. And like I said before, I understand the idea of attracting more Bull Gators with better amenities. I just also think that it is important to remember that college football is for everyone. Bull Gators and the families that save up all year long to be able to take their kids to a single game. When you downsize too much, the availability of those single tickets will go away, the prices will skyrocket, and that will make it harder for those families that are trying to take those kids to their first Gator game ever. The accessibility of this stadium is what builds fans of the future. Those 7-year-old kids whose parents saved up all year to take them to that one game are tomorrow's Bull Gators, potentially. College football is for everyone, and I would love for it to remain that way in the swamp. Also, if Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, etc., the big boys in college football aren't downsizing, why the heck would we? We are the Florida Gators. We don't need to downsize. We have one of the most intimidating stadiums in the country, and it's packed 95% of the time. UF sold out almost every game last season with a crappy product on the field. As the product continues to improve, which I think it's going to under Coach Napier, Florida will start to a new sellout streak. At one point, the Swamp had the largest sellout streak in the country, I believe 29 years, something crazy. We can get back to that. I'm very interested to see how this all comes out. Hopefully, it's not something that frustrates fans or hurts the environment in the Swamp, but ultimately, we'll see. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. It's heavy recruiting season as well, so if you missed any of our recent pickups, click here to learn the latest.